The moor was no place for the living after dark. Serene Ashford knew this, had known it since she was 7 years old, and her mother had warned her about the bogs that swallowed men whole, the mists that drove travelers mad, and the silence that could make a person forget their own name. But the living had never frightened her half as much as the people waiting in the house behind her. She ran. Rain lashed her face, her threadbare cloak soaked through within minutes. The wind howled across the open expanse of Thornwick Moor like a wounded animal, and somewhere in the darkness, thunder rolled low and menacing. Her half-boots squelched in the mud, each step threatening to send her sprawling into the black water that pooled in every hollow. But she did not stop. 3 years. 3 years of being erased from her own life, of watching her stepmother parade through the halls of Ashford Hall, wearing her dead mother's jewels, of hearing her stepsister Fidelia laugh about the poor creature who scrubbed the floors and emptied the chamber pots. 3 years of being called the ghost by servants who had once curtsied to her, of eating scraps in the kitchen while her father sat at the head of the table and pretended she did not exist. Tonight, Fidelia had gone too far. Serene's hand went to her cheek, still burning from the blow. Her stepsister's ring had split the skin just below her eye, and she could feel blood mixing with the rain, running down her face in thin rivulets. All because she had dared to look up when Lord Percival Huxley entered the drawing room. All because a man had glanced at her for one unguarded moment before Fidelia had stepped between them with a smile like shattered glass. "You forget your place," Fidelia had hissed later, cornering her in the servants' corridor. "You are dead, Serene, dead and buried, and if you ever look at what belongs to me again, I will make certain you feel it." The blow had come without warning. Serene had fled before the second one could land. Now she was running blindly through the moor, no destination in mind, no plan beyond escape. The rational part of her brain whispered that this was foolish, that she would die out here in the cold and the dark, that her body would sink into a bog and no one would ever know or care. Perhaps that would be a mercy. She was so lost in her own misery that she almost missed the sound. A groan, low and guttural, barely audible above the storm. She froze, heart hammering against her ribs. Another groan, closer now, coming from somewhere to her left, where the ground sloped down toward a rocky outcropping she had played on as a child. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Nothing good waited on the moors at night. But something else, something stubborn and foolish that her stepmother had never managed to beat out of her, made her turn toward the sound instead. She found him in the hollow between two boulders, half submerged in a pool of rainwater and blood. He was enormous. Even crumpled on the ground, she could tell he was taller than any man she had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to block a doorway. His clothing was dark, expensive, torn in a dozen places. A great coat that might once have been fine wool hung in shreds from his frame. And the blood. God in heaven, the blood. It poured from a wound in his side, black in the darkness, soaking the ground beneath him. His eyes opened. Serene stumbled backward, a scream catching in her throat. Those eyes were pale, impossibly pale, like winter ice or morning frost. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place, a rabbit before a wolf. "Help?" The word came out as a rasp, barely human. Please. She should run. She knew she should run. This man was dangerous. Everything about him screamed danger, from the military set of his shoulders to the scars she could see crossing his knuckles, white against skin that was rapidly losing color. "Who did this to you?" she heard herself ask. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, more grimace than humor. "Men who wanted me dead. They nearly succeeded." "Why?" "Because I am very good at making enemies." He coughed, and fresh blood bubbled at his lips, and very bad at making friends. She should leave him here. Let the moor take him. Let the bogs swallow another foolish man who had wandered where he did not belong. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. No one would ever know. But Seren had spent 3 years being smart and safe. And where had it gotten her? Scrubbing floors in her own home, wearing rags that had once belonged to scullery maids, flinching at the sound of her stepsister's footsteps. She was so tired of being afraid. "There is a hunting lodge," she said, the words coming before she could stop them. "A 1/4 mile north. Abandoned since my family stopped using it years ago. Can you walk?" Those ice-pale eyes studied her. "Why would you help me?" "I do not know. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain and his labored breathing. Then slowly, he nodded. "I can try to walk, but I will need your shoulder." Getting him upright nearly killed them both. He was heavier than she expected, dense with muscle despite the blood loss, and every step seemed to drain what little strength he had left. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and staggered under his weight, guiding him through the darkness by memory alone. "What is your name?" he asked through gritted teeth. She hesitated. Her name was dangerous. Her name was supposed to be carved on a headstone in the family plot, mourned by no one, forgotten by all. If anyone discovered that Seren Ashford still lived, that her death had been a convenient lie to break an inconvenient betrothal and steal an inconvenient inheritance, there would be consequences. "Maren," she said, the name of a doll she had loved as a child. "Maren Thorne." "Thorne," he repeated, and something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. "That is my name." Her blood went cold. "What?" "Valdric Thorne." Another cough. More blood. "Duke of Ironmore. Though I suspect that title will pass to my cousin by morning if we do not reach your lodge soon. Duke of Ironmore." The words hit her like a physical blow. She knew that name. Everyone in England knew that name. Valdric Thorne, the Butcher of Velmyra. The man who had crushed the uprising in the colonies with such brutal efficiency that grown men whispered his name like a curse. The man whose own family was said to fear him, whose servants reportedly drew lots to determine who would bring him his meals. The man she was now half carrying across the moors in the middle of a storm. "You should drop me," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Run back to wherever you came from, and forget you ever saw me. If I did that, you would die." "Yes." "Does that not frighten you?" Those pale eyes met hers again, and this time, there was something almost like amusement in their depths. "I have been frightening other people for so long, I have forgotten how to be frightened myself." She did not drop him. She did not know why. Perhaps it was spite or stubbornness, or simply the bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had nothing left to lose. But she tightened her grip on his waist and kept walking, step by agonizing step, until the dark shape of the hunting lodge emerged from the rain like a promise. Or a trap. The door was swollen with moisture and took 3 kicks to open. Inside, the lodge was cold, dusty, and thick with the smell of disuse. But it had a fireplace, and a bed, and walls that would keep out the wind. It would have to do. She lowered him onto the bed, gasping as his weight finally left her shoulders. He was unconscious before his head hit the pillow, his breathing shallow, his face the color of old ash. Seren stood over him, this monster from the stories, this butcher, this duke, and realized she had no idea what she had just done. Behind her, somewhere out in the storm, she heard hoofbeats. The hoofbeats were coming closer. Seren's heart slammed against her ribs as she pressed herself against the wall beside the window, peering out through a crack in the warped shutters. Torchlight flickered in the distance, bobbing through the rain. 3 riders, maybe 4, moving in a slow sweep across the moor. Looking for him. She glanced back at the unconscious Duke. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, blood still seeping through his ruined coat. If those men found him now, he would die. They would finish what they started, and she would be a witness. A loose end. Loose ends did not survive encounters with men who hunted dukes through the night. Think, she commanded herself. Think. The fireplace. She could not light a fire. The smoke would be visible for miles, a beacon announcing their presence. But without heat, he would not survive the night. His skin was already cold to the touch, his lips faintly blue. Blankets. There had been blankets here once, stored in the chest at the foot of the bed. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, throwing open the chest and nearly weeping with relief at what she found. Moth-eaten wool, musty with age, but intact. She pulled out every blanket she could find and piled them on top of him, layer after layer, until only his face remained visible. The hoofbeats stopped. Serene froze, hands still clutching a blanket. Outside, she could hear voices, male voices, low and urgent, speaking in clipped tones she could not quite make out. Then footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching the lodge. She had seconds to decide. Hide him. Hide yourself. Pray they move on. She threw the last blanket over the Duke's body, covering him completely, then grabbed a pile of old sacking from the corner and threw it on top of the bed for good measure. From a distance, in the darkness, it might look like nothing more than storage. Discarded supplies from a lodge long abandoned. The door handle rattled. Serene pressed herself into the shadows behind a broken wardrobe, making herself as small as possible. Her breath came in short, silent gasps. Her hands were shaking. Through the crack between the wardrobe and the wall, she could see the door swing open. A man entered, torch held high. He was tall, lean, dressed in dark clothing that seemed designed for violence. A sword hung at his hip. His face was scarred, one eye milky and blind, the other sharp as a blade. Anything. Another voice from outside. The scarred man swept his torch across the room, shadows leaping and dancing. Serene pressed deeper into her hiding spot, willing herself to become invisible. The light passed over the bed, over the pile of blankets and sacking, and moved on. Nothing, the scarred man called back. Lodge is empty. Been abandoned for years by the look of it. The blood trail led this direction. Rain washed it away. Could have gone anywhere. The scarred man spat on the floor. Bastard is probably dead in a bog by now. Good riddance. Lord Craven wants a body. Lord Craven can search the moors himself, then. I am not spending another hour in this god-forsaken weather for a corpse. The scarred man turned toward the door, then paused, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. Serene stopped breathing. For a long, terrible moment, the man simply stood there, torch flickering, his one good eye scanning the darkness. Then he shrugged, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. The door slammed shut behind him. Serene did not move. She listened to the footsteps retreating, to the voices arguing, to the horses being mounted. Only when the hoofbeats had faded completely into the storm did she allow herself to breathe again. Her knees gave out. She slid down the wall, landing hard on the cold floor, her whole body shaking with delayed terror. They had been so close, inches from discovering them both. If that man had looked harder, if he had pulled back those blankets, if he had noticed the fresh blood on the floor that she had been too panicked to hide. She forced herself to stand. There was no time for weakness. The Duke was still unconscious, but his breathing seemed steadier now, warmed by the blankets. She needed to see to his wounds, needed to stop the bleeding, needed to do something other than cower in corners waiting for death to find her. Lord Craven, she murmured, testing the name. It meant nothing to her, but clearly it meant something to the men hunting the Duke of Ironmore. Clearly someone wanted Valdric Thorn dead badly enough to send assassins through a storm. She found a candle and lit it with shaking hands, the tiny flame barely enough to see by. Then she pulled back the blankets and looked properly at the wound in his side. It was bad. A blade had gone in just below his ribs, deep enough to cause serious damage, though by some miracle it seemed to have missed his vital organs. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped entirely. Without proper treatment, infection would set in within days. And she had nothing. No bandages, no medicine, no clean water. Nothing but her own 2 hands, and a stubbornness that bordered on foolishness. "You picked a poor rescuer," she told the unconscious Duke. "I have no idea what I'm doing." His eyes opened. Seren jerked backward, nearly dropping the candle. But he did not move, did not reach for her, did not do any of the violent things she might have expected from the butcher of Velmyra. He simply looked at her with those pale, terrible eyes and said, "Then we are even. I have no idea why you are doing it. You are awake, unfortunately." His gaze moved past her, taking in the dark lodge, the pile of blankets, the flickering candle. How long? Not long. There were men. Searching for you. They left perhaps 10 minutes ago. Lord Craven's men. That name was mentioned, yes. A muscle ticked in his cheek. Then he's making his move sooner than I expected. Bold of him. Stupid. But bold. Who is Lord Craven? My cousin. The Duke tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back, a groan escaping through clenched teeth. Also, apparently, the man who wants me dead. His own cousin. Seren absorbed this information with the numb acceptance of someone who understood perfectly how families could turn on their own. Had her stepmother not done the same? Had her father not allowed it? "Your wound needs cleaning," she said flatly, "and binding. If I do nothing, you will be dead by morning. Then do something. I told you. I do not know how. You found me on the moors, carried me here, hid me from armed men." His eyes met hers, still sharp despite the pain. "You are clearly not as helpless as you pretend, so stop pretending." She stared at him. No one had spoken to her like that in 3 years. No one had looked at her and seen anything other than a servant, a ghost, a convenient target for cruelty. He saw something else. "Fine," she said, "but if you die, it is not my fault." Agreed. She turned away before he could see the strange expression on her face. It might have been determination. It might have been fear. It might have been hope. And hope, she had learned long ago, was the most dangerous thing of all. There was a pump behind the lodge. Seren remembered it from childhood, from summers spent playing in these rooms, while her mother sat by the window and read. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else, a different girl in a different life. The pump still worked, though it took several minutes of desperate cranking before water sputtered out, brown at first, and then clear. She filled a basin she found in the kitchen, grabbed what remained of her own petticoat for bandages, and returned to find the Duke watching her with unnerving intensity. "You move like someone who has been trained to be invisible," he said. She did not answer. Instead, she set the basin on the floor beside the bed and began tearing her petticoat into strips. The fabric was rough, not ideal, but it was clean. Cleaner than anything else in this lodge. "I will need to see the wound," she said. "Then see it." She helped him remove his coat, his waistcoat, his ruined shirt. Each layer revealed more damage. The stab wound in his side, yes, but also older scars. A puckered bullet hole near his shoulder. A long, jagged line across his chest that looked like it had been made by a saber. The evidence of a life spent in violence, written on his flesh like a map. "War," he said, apparently noticing her stare. "The colonies. 7 years of it. You were a soldier. I was a commander, which means I gave the orders that put other men in positions to receive wounds like these." His jaw tightened as she pressed a wet cloth to the fresh wound, and occasionally received them myself when my orders went wrong. "They call you the Butcher of Velmyra. I know what they call me. Is it true? What they say you did there?" He was silent for a long moment. She cleaned the wound carefully, methodically, the way she had once watched the housekeeper clean scrapes on her own knees. The bleeding had slowed to a trickle now. That was good, she thought. Vilmyra was a mistake, he said finally. My mistake. I ordered an assault on a position I believed was held only by enemy soldiers. I was wrong. There were civilians, families. By the time we realized, he stopped, something closing behind his eyes. I gave the order to retreat, but the damage was done. 63 people died because I did not verify my intelligence properly. 63. I know the exact number. I know their names. I had them carved into a memorial on my estate so that I would never be allowed to forget. His voice was flat, motionless, but his hands had curled into fists. The newspapers called me a butcher because it made a better story than the truth. The truth was simpler. I was careless, and people died. Seren found herself without a response. She had expected excuses, justifications, and the kind of arrogance that men in power wore like armor. She had not expected this quiet, terrible honesty. Hold still, she said instead. I need to bind this. She worked in silence, wrapping the makeshift bandages around his torso, pulling them tight enough to apply pressure without restricting his breathing. He did not flinch, did not make a sound, though she knew it must have hurt. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and realized her hands were covered in his blood. You should rest, she said. The binding will hold for now, but you need a real physician. Someone who knows what they are doing. No physicians, no outsiders. Anyone I contact could be working for Craven. Then what do you suggest? We stay here. Wait until I am strong enough to travel. Then I return to Ironmore and deal with my cousin personally. We? She shook her head. I helped you survive the night. That is the extent of my obligation. Is it? Those pale eyes fixed on her again, seeing too much. Then why did you give me a false name? Her blood went cold. I do not know what you mean. Marin Thorn. That is the name you gave me. He smiled, thin and humorless. There is no Marin Thorn. I would know. Thorn is my family name. I am aware of every living relative who bears it, and none of them are young women with blood on their faces and fear in their eyes. She should run. She should flee into the storm and disappear and never look back. But her legs would not move, and his gaze held her pinned like an insect on a board. Who are you really? He asked quietly. No one. Lies. A servant from the Ashford estate. I ran away tonight and found you on the moor. That is all. More lies. He shifted, wincing, and his hand caught her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was weak, barely more than a suggestion of pressure, but it stopped her cold. You speak like a gentlewoman. You move like someone who was raised with status and lost it. And you flinched when I mentioned the Ashford estate. What are you hiding? Nothing that concerns you. Everything concerns me. You saved my life. That makes you my responsibility until I can repay the debt. I do not want repayment. Then what do you want? The question hit her like a slap. What did she want? She had spent so long simply surviving, simply enduring, that she had forgotten how to want anything at all. I want to be left alone, she said finally. Then you should not have saved a duke. His grip loosened, and something almost like sympathy flickered in his eyes. We are bound now, you and I, whether either of us likes it or not. I could leave, walk out that door and never come back. You are too weak to stop me. True, but you will not. How do you know? Because you have nowhere else to go. He settled back against the pillows, exhaustion finally overtaking him. I recognize the look. I have seen it in soldiers who have lost everything, in men who kept fighting because death was easier than surrender. You have that look. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he knew nothing about her life, about the choices that had brought her to this cold and dusty lodge in the middle of nowhere. But he was right. God help her, He was right. "Fine," she said, the words scraping her throat raw. "I will stay until you are well enough to travel. But I am not telling you my real name. I am not telling you anything about my past. And the moment you can walk on your own, I disappear." "Agreed. And you will not ask me questions. I make no promises about that." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone. "I am told curiosity is one of my many flaws." She pulled her wrist from his grasp and stood, moving toward the fire she still could not light, the window she could not look through, the door she could not walk out of. "Sleep," she said without turning around. "I will keep watch. You need rest as much as I do. I will rest when you are gone." Silence. Then, so quiet she almost missed it. "Thank you." She did not respond, did not trust herself to respond, because something was shifting inside her, something she had buried so deep she thought it was dead. He looked at her like she was a person, like she mattered, like her choices meant something. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was going to destroy her. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the darkness, men were still hunting for the Duke of Ironmore. Inside, Seren Ashford sat in the shadows and watched a monster sleep, and wondered which of them the more dangerous creature was truly. She had a feeling she was about to find out. 3 days passed. The storm broke on the second morning, leaving behind a landscape of silver frost and pale winter sunlight. But by then, Valdrick's fever had set in, and there was no question of moving him anywhere. Seren had never nursed a dying man before. She had never nursed anyone, really. But desperation was an excellent teacher, and she learned quickly how to keep the wound clean with water boiled over a small fire she finally risked lighting once the hunters seemed to have moved on, how to tear her remaining undergarments into fresh bandages when the old ones soaked through, how to drip water between his cracked lips when he was too delirious to drink on his own. She learned other things too. She learned that the Duke of Ironmore talked in his sleep. Fragments of orders barked to soldiers who were not there. Names she did not recognize, spoken with anguish that made her chest tight. Once, he grabbed her wrist so hard she thought the bones would break, staring at her with eyes that saw someone else entirely. "I gave the order to retreat," he gasped. "Why did no one listen? Why did no one stop?" "You are safe," she told him, though she had no idea if it was true. "You are safe. The battle is over." His grip loosened, his eyes closed, and she sat beside him in the darkness, rubbing the bruises on her wrist, wondering what kind of hell lived inside the mind of a man called Butcher. On the third day, the fever broke. She woke to find him watching her. She had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, exhausted beyond the point of caution, and now those pale eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough, weak, but coherent. "I thought you would run the moment I lost consciousness. I considered it." She straightened, wincing at the ache in her neck. "But you kept calling out in your sleep. It seemed cruel to leave a dying man alone with his nightmares." "I do not have nightmares. You do. You have them every night. You call out names. Morrissey, Blackwood, someone called Thea." His expression shuddered. "Those are not your concern. You made me your concern when you said we were bound. I am simply returning the favor." Silence stretched between them. He looked away first, which surprised her. The Butcher of Velmyra, unable to hold the gaze of a woman he outweighed by at least 5 stone. "I need to check your bandages," she said, standing. "Can you sit up?" He could, though it clearly cost him. She unwound the makeshift bandages carefully, holding her breath as she examined the wound beneath. The edges were pink rather than red now, and the discharge had cleared. Still ugly, still dangerous, but no longer actively trying to kill him. "It is healing," she said, unable to keep the relief from her voice. "You sound surprised." I am surprised. I told you I had no idea what I was doing. And yet, here we are. He caught her hand before she could pull away, his fingers rough against her skin. You saved my life. Twice now. Once on the moor, and once when the fever could have taken me. I did what anyone would have done. No. You did what almost no one would have done. Especially not for me. His thumb traced a small circle on her palm, and she felt the touch all the way to her spine. Why? She pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of how close they were, how small the lodge had become over these 3 days. I do not know. Perhaps I wanted to prove I could do something other than scrub floors and empty chamber pots. Is that what your life has become? Servitude? My life is none of your concern. You made it my concern when you gave me a false name and refused to explain why. He shifted, grimacing. I have had 3 days of fever dreams to think about you, Marin Thorne, who is not Marin Thorne. 3 days to wonder what could drive a gentlewoman to flee across the moors in the middle of a storm. Perhaps I am simply mad. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone hurt you badly enough that death on the moors seemed preferable to staying. The words hit too close. She turned away, busying herself with folding the old bandages, anything to avoid those seeing eyes. There is blood on your face, he said quietly. Dried now, but I saw it that first night. Someone struck you hard enough to break the skin. Recently. I fell. Onto someone's ring? The cut is too clean for a fall. Too precise. She said nothing. Who hit you? No one. Who hit you? Why do you care? She spun back, suddenly furious. You do not know me. You owe me nothing beyond whatever imaginary debt you have constructed in your head. What does it matter who hits me or why? It matters because you saved my life. His voice was steady, implacable. It matters because I am a man who pays his debts, and right now the only currency I have is the truth. So I will give you mine, and perhaps eventually you will give me yours. I do not want your truth. Too late. You are getting it anyway. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something at his head and watch that calm expression finally crack. But she was too tired, too worn down by 3 days of fear and exhaustion and the strange intimacy of caring for a man she was supposed to hate. Fine, she said flatly. Tell me your truth then. But do not expect mine in return. The names I called out. Morrissey, Blackwood, Thea. He paused, and she saw his hands curl tighter. They were people who died because of me. Morrissey was my lieutenant. Blackwood was my sergeant. And Thea. Another pause, longer this time. Thea was my sister. Serin's anger dissolved into something colder. Your sister? She died 2 years ago. Consumption. I was still in the colonies when it happened. By the time I received word, she had been in the ground for 3 months. His voice was flat, reciting facts. But his fists were white-knuckled. I never said goodbye, never told her I loved her. I was too busy playing soldier across an ocean to be there when she needed me most. That was not your fault. Everything is my fault. That is what being a commander means. You carry the weight of every decision, every failure, every life lost, because you were not good enough, or fast enough, or smart enough. He met her eyes again, and for the first time, she saw something other than coldness in their depths. I have a great deal of blood on my hands. Most of it deserved to be there, but some of it did not, and that is what keeps me awake at night. Words failed her. She had no response to this sudden, brutal honesty from a man she had assumed incapable of vulnerability. Your turn, he said. I told you. I am not sharing my truth. Then tell me something small. Something that does not matter. Give me something to hold on to besides the mystery of you. She should refuse, should maintain the walls she had built so carefully over 3 years of survival. But something in his voice, something broken and weary and achingly human, made her pause. My mother used to bring me to this lodge, she heard herself say. When I was a child, before she died, we would spend summers here, just the two of us, and she would read to me by the fire while I played with my dolls. The doll named Marin. She nodded, throat tight. What happened to her? Your mother? Fever. When I was 14. After that, everything changed. She stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. That is all I am giving you. Do not ask for more. He did not push, did not demand or threaten or manipulate. He simply nodded, and his face altered into something softer. Thank you, he said. She did not respond, could not respond, because somewhere in the last 3 days, somewhere between the fever and the blood and the nightmares, something had changed between them. She just had no idea what it meant. Outside, hoofbeats echoed across the frozen moor. Seren's blood went cold. Not the scattered hoofbeats of a search party this time. These were deliberate, purposeful, heading directly toward the lodge. Someone knew they were here. Help me up, Valdric said, already struggling to rise. You cannot fight. You can barely stand. Then I will die on my feet rather than in this bed. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. The softness of moments ago had vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who had survived 7 years of war. My sword. Where is my sword? I do not know. You did not have one when I found you. Damn. He made it upright, swaying dangerously, one hand braced against the wall. Is there anything in this lodge that could serve as a weapon? A fire poker, some rusted tools in the kitchen. Get them. All of them. Now. She moved without thinking, grabbing the poker from beside the cold fireplace, a dull knife from a drawer, anything with an edge or a point. By the time she returned, Valdric had positioned himself beside the door, pale and sweating, but standing. Give me the poker, he said. You will collapse before you can swing it. Then I will collapse after. Give it to me. The hoofbeats stopped. A single rider, she realized. Not an army. Not a hunting party. Just one person, dismounting, approaching the door. A knock, polite, almost delicate. Serene and Valdric exchanged glances. Assassins did not knock. Hello, a male voice, cultured and pleasant. I saw smoke from your chimney. I apologize for the intrusion, but I seem to have become lost in this God-forsaken wilderness. Might I trouble you for directions? Something flickered in Valdric's expression. Recognition, then cold fury. Open the door, he said quietly. Do you know who it is? Yes, and he already knows we are here. Pretending otherwise will only make this worse. She did not understand, but she obeyed. The door swung open to reveal a man perhaps 30 years of age, handsome in a sharp, polished way, dressed in riding clothes that cost more than everything Seren had ever owned combined. His smile was warm, friendly, and utterly false. Ah, he said, his gaze moving past her to Valdric. Cousin. You look terrible. Lord Craven. It had to be. The man who had sent assassins through a storm, who wanted the Duke of Ironmore dead, who was apparently bold enough to come finish the job himself. Serene's hand tightened on the knife still hidden in her skirts. Ambrose. Valdric's voice was flat. I was wondering when you would show your face. I heard there was some unpleasantness on the moors the other night. Bandits, apparently. I came as soon as I could to make sure my dear cousin had not fallen victim to their depredations. Lord Craven's smile widened. Imagine my relief to find you alive and well. Imagine. Though I confess, I am curious about your circumstances. Those sharp eyes moved to Seren, assessing. You seem to have found yourself a nursemaid. How fortunate. And such a pretty one, too. She is no concern of yours. Everything about you concerns me, cousin. We are family, after all. Lord Craven stepped closer, and Seren saw Valdric's grip tighten on the poker. I do not believe we have been introduced, miss. I am Ambrose Craven. And you are? Marin Thorne, Valdrick said before she could speak. A distant relation. She was visiting from the north when the storm caught us both unprepared. A relation? How fascinating. I thought I knew all the Thorne connections. Craven's gaze lingered on Saren's face, on the healing cut below her eye, on her rough clothing and work-worn hands. She does not look like a Thorne. She is one nonetheless. Craven smiled again, that warm, empty smile. Well, Cousin Marin, you must come to dinner at Thornhall once my cousin is recovered. I insist. Any family of Valdrick's is family of mine. She will be returning north as soon as the road's clear, Valdrick said flatly. Surely there is no rush. The weather has been so unpredictable lately. It would be dangerous to travel alone. Craven's eyes met Serene's, and something predatory flickered in their depths. I would be happy to provide an escort. My men are quite thorough. The same men who had hunted Valdrick across the moors. The same men who had nearly found them hiding in this very lodge. The threat was clear, even if the words were silk. That will not be necessary, Serene said, finding her voice. My cousin has the situation well in hand. Does he? Craven glanced at Valdrick, taking in his pallor, his weakness, the way he leaned against the wall for support. He does not look well in hand. He looks, if you will forgive me, like a man who has recently been stabbed. The bandits, Valdrick said flatly. Yes, the bandits. Craven nodded slowly. So many bandits on the moors these days. It is a wonder anyone survives. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats. Serene could feel the tension coiling in Valdrick's body, could see him calculating whether he had enough strength to strike if Craven moved. Well, Craven broke the silence with another smile, this one almost genuine in its menace. I can see you are busy recovering. I will not intrude any longer. But do come to Thornhall soon, cousin. We have much to discuss. Family matters, you understand. I understand perfectly. I thought you might. Craven turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. His gaze found Serene again, lingering with an interest that made her skin crawl. And Cousin Marin, do take care of yourself. These moors can be treacherous for young women alone. He was gone before she could respond, mounting his horse with easy grace and riding away across the frozen landscape. They watched until he disappeared over a ridge, until the sound of hoofbeats faded into nothing. He knows, Serene said quietly. He knows I survived, yes, and now he knows about you. Why did you tell him I was a relation? Why give him a name at all? Because you needed protection. Valdrick finally allowed himself to sag against the wall, exhaustion overtaking him. If he thinks you are family, he cannot move against you without moving against me. And despite his ambitions, Ambrose is not yet ready for open war. Yet. Valdrick closed his eyes. He will come back. With more men, more pretexts, more pleasant smiles hiding knives. We need to be gone before then. You cannot travel. You can barely stand. I will have to stand. We both will. His eyes opened again, fixing on her face. Unless you would prefer to stay here and wait for him to return. He seemed quite interested in you. The memory of Craven's gaze made her stomach turn. The way he had looked at her, assessed her, filed her away for future use. She had seen that look before, on her stepmother's face when calculating how to extract the most labor from her, on Fidelia's face when deciding which insult would wound the deepest. I am not staying here, she said. Good. Then we leave at first light. Valdrick pushed himself upright with visible effort. Help me to the bed. I need whatever rest I can get before tomorrow. She moved to support him, sliding under his arm, taking his weight against her shoulder. He was heavy, solid, and warm despite his weakness. She could feel his heartbeat against her side. Too fast, too hard. He called you Cousin Marin, Valdrick said quietly as they shuffled toward the bed. You did not correct him. You had already given him the name. It seemed foolish to contradict. So now, you are a Thorne, At least until we reach Ironmore. I am not going to Ironmore. You are, because Ambrose has seen your face, and he will remember it. Vuldrik lowered himself onto the bed with a grunt of pain. The only place you will be safe now is under my protection. And my protection lives at Ironmore. I do not need your protection. Everyone needs protection from Ambrose Craven. His eyes met hers, deadly serious. He is charming and civilized and utterly without conscience. He will smile at you while he slides a knife between your ribs. I have seen him do it. Then why is he still alive? Why have you not stopped him? Because he is careful. Because he has powerful friends. Because proving what he is would require evidence I do not have. Valdric's jaw worked. And because until 3 nights ago, I did not have proof that he wanted me dead. Now I do. Your wounds. My wounds. The men who made them work for him. I recognized one of them, a mercenary he has used before for unsavory tasks. Valdric settled back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at his features. When I recover, when I am strong enough, I will deal with my cousin properly. But until then, I need to stay alive. And so do you. Seren stood beside the bed, looking down at this man who had crashed into her life 3 days ago and overturned everything she thought she knew. He was dangerous, violent, a killer by his own admission. And he was the only thing standing between her and a man who had looked at her like she was prey. Fine, she said quietly. I will go to Ironmore, but only until I can find somewhere else. Somewhere your cousin cannot reach. Agreed. And you will not ask me questions about my past. I make no promises about that. You are infuriating, so I have been told. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone. Rest now. Tomorrow will be difficult. She moved toward the chair, but his hand caught her wrist. The floor is too cold, he said. And that chair is torture. There is room on the bed. Absolutely not. I am too weak to be a threat, and you are too exhausted to be proper. Just sleep. She should refuse, should insist on maintaining whatever boundaries remained between them. But he was right. She was exhausted, and the chair was torture. If you touch me, I will stab you with that rusty knife, she said. Understood. She lay down on the far edge of the bed, as far from him as possible, still fully clothed, and still tense with wariness. But the mattress was soft, and the blankets were warm, and somewhere in the darkness, she heard him breathing, steady and even. She was asleep within minutes, and if she woke once during the night to find his hand resting lightly on hers, she did not pull away. They left at dawn. Valdric was stronger than he had been, but not by much. He moved slowly, carefully, leaning on a makeshift walking stick Seren had fashioned from a branch. Every step seemed to cost him, though he never complained, never asked to stop, never showed anything but grim determination. She had found a horse behind the lodge, an old plow horse, abandoned in a ramshackle stable she had not noticed in the darkness of that first night. It was not fast, but it was sturdy, and it could carry Valdric's weight while she walked beside. How far to Ironmore? She asked as they crested the first ridge. 2 days, perhaps 3 at this pace. There is a village called Westvale about halfway. We can rest there, find proper supplies. And your cousin? Will he not be watching the roads? Ambrose is not stupid enough to attack me openly. Not yet. He needs my death to look like an accident, or at the very least, plausibly deniable. Valdric shifted in the saddle, grimacing. The moment he moves against a duke without cover, he invites investigation. And investigation is the last thing he wants. Why does he want you dead so badly? Because I am the only thing standing between him and the Ironmore title. I have no heir, no wife, no children. If I die, everything passes to him. Valdric's jaw worked. He has been waiting for this opportunity for years. I simply never gave him an opening until now. What changed? Silence. The horse plodded forward, hooves crunching on frozen grass. I stopped caring, Valdrick said finally. After Thea died, after the war ended, after I came home to find everything I loved gone or broken, I stopped being careful, stopped watching my back. He looked down at her, and something raw flickered in his eyes. I think part of me was hoping someone would succeed. The admission hung between them, terrible in its honesty. That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard, Seren said. Is it? Yes. You survived a war. You survived assassins on the moors. You survived 3 days of fever with only a woman who did not know what she was doing to nurse you. She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. You do not get to give up now. Not after all of that. Why do you care? I do not know. The words came out sharper than she intended. Perhaps I simply refused to have wasted my time saving a man who wanted to die. His expression altered. That softening again. That crack in the armor she had seen the night before. You are a strange woman, Marin Thorne, and you are a stubborn fool. We make quite the pair. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. I suppose we do. They traveled in silence after that, following a path Valdrick seemed to know by instinct. The moors gave way to rolling hills, then scattered farmland, then the first signs of civilization. Smoke from chimneys, the distant sound of church bells. Life, ordinary and ongoing, completely unaware of the violence and desperation that had brought them here. Westvale appeared in the late afternoon, a small village clustered around a crossroads. An inn dominated the main square, its sign depicting a golden sheaf of wheat. Seren felt something loosen in her chest at the sight. Warm food, clean water, a bed that was not shared with a wounded duke. We will need to be careful, Valdrick said as they approached. If Ambrose has agents here, they will be watching for a man matching my description. Then perhaps you should not be the one asking for rooms. He looked at her sharply. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that I go in alone, a woman traveling north, stopping for the night. Nothing unusual. She met his gaze steadily. You wait outside the village until dark. I will find you once I have secured accommodations. That is too dangerous. If someone recognizes you, no one knows me here. No one knows me anywhere, except the people I am running from. And they are not looking for me in Westvale. She could see him calculating, weighing risks, searching for flaws in her plan. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. There is a copse of trees half a mile back. I will wait there. If you are not back by nightfall, I will assume the worst and come looking. Do not assume the worst. Assume I am simply slow. I never assume anything about you. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Be careful. I am always careful. She left him at the edge of the village, her heart beating faster than it should. This was madness. She was walking into an unknown town, pretending to be someone she was not, trusting a man she barely knew to wait for her rather than abandon her the moment she was out of sight. But then again, her whole life had been madness lately. What was one more risk? The inn was warm, crowded, and thick with the smell of ale and roasting meat. Seren kept her head down, her cloak pulled close, moving through the common room like a shadow. The innkeeper was a heavy-set woman with kind eyes and a brisk manner. Room for the night? The woman asked. Please. I am traveling north to visit family. The roads have been difficult. They always are this time of year. The innkeeper quoted a price, and Seren paid from the small purse Valdrick had pressed into her hand before they parted. Real money, more than she had held in 3 years. Room is upstairs, second on the left. Supper is served at 7. Thank you. She was turning to leave when a voice stopped her cold. Seren? Seren Ashford? Her blood turned to ice. Slowly she turned. A man stood near the fire, ale in hand, staring at her with undisguised shock. He was familiar in the worst possible way. Fair hair, weak chin, expensive clothes. The kind of bland handsomeness that came from good breeding rather than genuine appeal. Lord Percival Huxley. The man whose glance had earned her a blow from Fidelia's ring. The man her stepmother had been angling for Fidelia to marry. The man who, for one unguarded moment, had looked at Seren like she was something other than a ghost. "It is you," he said, moving closer. "Good God. We thought you were dead. Think. 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 I'm sorry, sir." She forced her voice to remain steady. "I believe you have mistaken me for someone else. No, I know your face. You are Seren Ashford, Roland Ashford's daughter. You died 3 years ago. There was a funeral. A headstone." He frowned, confusion battling with certainty. "But you are standing right here. My name is Marinthorn. I am a distant relation of the Duke of Ironmore. I have never heard of Seren Ashford. That is impossible. I saw you at Ashford Hall not 4 nights ago. You were serving at dinner. You looked up when I entered. And Fidelia..." He stopped, something shifting in his expression. "Fidelia struck you. I saw the mark on your face. You are mistaken." "I am not." He stepped closer, and she could smell wine on his breath, could see the glassy sheen in his eyes. He had been drinking for hours. "What is happening here? Why are you pretending to be dead? Why are you pretending to be someone else?" The common room had gone quiet. People were staring. The innkeeper was watching with sharp, curious eyes. "Sir, please." Seren lowered her voice. "You are causing a scene. I want answers." His hand closed around her wrist, not hard, but firm. "Where have you been? Why did your family tell everyone you were dead?" "What? Remove your hand from my cousin." The voice came from behind her. Low, cold, dangerous. Serene's heart stopped. Valdric stood in the doorway of the inn, pale as death, barely upright, but radiating a menace that made the entire room go still. He should not have been there. He should have been hiding in the copse, waiting for dark. But here he was, and his eyes were fixed on Lord Huxley with an intensity that promised violence. "I beg your pardon?" Huxley released Seren's wrist, turning to face this new threat. "Who are you?" "I am the Duke of Ironmore, and the woman you are accosting is under my protection." Valdric stepped forward, and Seren saw his hand move to the knife at his belt. "I will not ask again. Step away from her." Huxley's face went white. The Duke of Ironmore, the Butcher of Velmyra. Every person in this room knew that name, knew the stories, and knew what this man was capable of. "I meant no offense," Huxley stammered, backing away. "I simply thought I recognized her." A mistake. Clearly a mistake. Clearly. Valdric's eyes never left Huxley's face. "My cousin is tired from traveling. She needs rest, not the attentions of drunken fools who cannot tell one woman from another." "Of course. Of course." "My apologies." Huxley was practically tripping over himself to retreat. "I will not trouble you further, Your Grace." He fled. Actually fled, nearly knocking over a chair in his haste to escape. The common room remained frozen, every eye fixed on Valdric, on Serene, on the space between them. "Come," Valdric said quietly, offering her his arm. "Let us retire before anyone else decides to accost you." She took his arm, feeling him sway slightly against her weight, feeling the tremor in his muscles that told her he was moments from collapse. Together, they climbed the stairs to the room she had rented, closing the door behind them with a click that sounded like finality. "You should not have come," she said, the moment they were alone. "You could have been recognized. You could have been killed. So could you." He lowered himself onto the bed, breathing hard. "He knew your name. Your real name." "Yes." "Seren Ashford." Silence. There was no point in denying it now. "Yes." "Ashford. As in Ashford Hall. As in the family whose estate borders my own lands to the north." His eyes found hers. sharp despite his exhaustion. The family that announced their daughter's death 3 years ago. The family that held a funeral for a girl who was apparently still alive. It is a long story. We have all night. She should lie. Should maintain the fiction. Find some explanation that did not require the truth. But she was so tired. So tired of pretending, of hiding, of being someone other than who she was. My stepmother wanted me gone, she said quietly. I was an inconvenience, a reminder of my father's first marriage, of the wife he actually loved. So she convinced him to declare me dead, to hold a funeral for a girl who was still breathing. And then she put me to work as a servant in my own home. Your father allowed this? My father does whatever she tells him. He has not looked me in the eye in 3 years. Valdric was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, controlled, but she could hear something dangerous simmering beneath the surface. And the cut on your face, the blow that made you run onto the moors? My stepsister, Fidelia. She saw Lord Huxley look at me and decided I needed to be reminded of my place, your place, dead and buried, a ghost, nothing. Another silence. Then Valdric rose, crossed to where she stood, and took her face in his hands. His palms were rough, calloused, and warm against her cold skin. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You are not nothing, he said quietly. You saved my life. You carried me across the moors. You nursed me through a fever that should have killed me. That is not nothing. It does not matter. I am still legally dead. I have no name, no status, and no claim to anything that was once mine. Then we will change that. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, gentle, almost reverent. I do not know how yet, but I swear to you, Seren Ashford, you will not remain buried forever. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? He did not answer. Not with words, but something in his eyes, something fierce and broken and desperately alive, told her everything she needed to know. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to hope. They did not speak of it again that night. Valdric collapsed into an exhausted sleep within minutes of his declaration, his body finally surrendering to the demands of his healing wounds. Seren sat in the chair beside the bed, watching him breathe, replaying his words in her mind until they lost all meaning. You will not remain buried forever. Pretty words, dangerous words, the kind of words that made a person believe in impossible things. She did not sleep, could not sleep. Her mind kept circling back to Lord Huxley, to the shock on his face when he recognized her, to the questions he had asked. Questions that would be repeated. Questions that would eventually reach Ashford Hall. Her stepmother would know she was alive. Fidelia would know. And they would come for her. Dawn broke gray and cold. Valdric woke slowly, blinking against the weak light, and found her still sitting in the same chair, still watching him. Did you sleep at all? He asked. No. That was foolish. So was revealing yourself in the common room last night. We are both fools, apparently. He sat up, wincing, and she saw that some color had returned to his face. The rest had done him good, even if it had done nothing for her. Lord Huxley will talk, she said flatly. He will tell someone what he saw. Word will spread. My stepmother will learn that I am alive and traveling with the Duke of Ironmore. Let her learn. You do not understand. She will not simply accept this. She has spent 3 years building a lie, convincing society that I am dead, so she could control my father's fortune without interference. If I resurface, that lie unravels. Then let it unravel. She will destroy me first. Serene's voice cracked. She will find a way. She always finds a way. I do not know how yet, but she will claim I am an imposter, or a madwoman, or a criminal. She will turn everyone against me before I can speak a single word in my own defense. Valdric swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood. He was steadier today, stronger, though still far from healed. He crossed the small room and knelt before her chair, putting himself at her eye level. "Look at me," he said quietly. She did. "I have spent my entire adult life fighting enemies who wanted me dead. Kings and generals, and men far more powerful than your stepmother, have tried to destroy me, and I am still here." His hands found hers, calloused fingers interlacing with hers. "You are not alone in this anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Why? Why would you bind yourself to my troubles when you have so many of your own?" "Because you bound yourself to mine." His thumb traced circles on her palm, the same unconscious gesture from the night before. "You did not have to save me on the moors. You did not have to hide me from Ambrose's men. You did not have to nurse me through the fever or follow me to Westvale or any of it. But you did. That was different. How? You were dying. I could not simply walk away. And yet most people would have. Most people would have seen a bleeding stranger in the dark and kept running. His eyes held hers, intense, searching. You stopped. You helped. You risked your own safety for a man you had never met. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. It tells you I am foolish. It tells me you are brave." His grip tightened on her hands. "It tells me you are kind. It tells me that 3 years of cruelty did not destroy the person you were meant to be." Tears burned behind her eyes. She had not cried in so long, had trained herself not to cry because tears were weakness, and weakness was punished. "You do not know me," she whispered. "I know enough." He rose, still holding her hands, pulling her up with him. "I know that you saved my life. I know that you make me want to live it. And I know that whatever happens next, I am not letting you face it alone." "Valdric, I am not finished." He released one of her hands, reaching up to cup her face the way he had the night before. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said days ago when we were still in that lodge, and I was too much of a coward to admit it." Her heart was pounding. "What?" "That first night, when you found me on the moors. When you could have left me to die and chose to help instead." He paused, and she saw something raw and vulnerable flicker behind his eyes. "I thought you were an angel, or a ghost, something not quite real, sent to drag me back from the edge I'd been walking toward for months. I am not an angel. No, you are something better. You are human, and flawed, and stubborn, and brave, and absolutely infuriating." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, "And I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you told me I picked a poor rescuer." The words hit her like a physical blow. Love. He had said love. "That is impossible," she said. "We have known each other for less than a week. I know. You are a duke. I am a dead woman with no name and no status, and enemies who want me silenced. I know. This is utter foolishness. The most utter foolishness imaginable," he agreed. "And yet here we are." She should pull away. Should remind him of all the reasons this could never work, all the obstacles standing between them, all the ways this would end in heartbreak. But his hand was warm on her face, and his eyes were soft, and for the first time in 3 years, someone was looking at her like she mattered. "I do not know how to do this," she said quietly. "I do not know how to trust someone, how to let someone in. I've been alone for so long. So have I." His forehead touched hers, breath mingling. "We can learn together. And if we fail, then we fail together. But at least we will have tried." She did not know who moved first. Perhaps they moved at the same moment, drawn together by some force neither of them could name. But suddenly his lips were on hers, soft and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not pull away. The kiss deepened, his hand sliding into her hair, her fingers gripping the front of his shirt. It was desperate and tender and terrifying all at once. It tasted like hope and fear and the impossible promise of something more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were shining. "Well," he said quietly, "that complicates things." "Yes," she laughed, a sound she barely recognized. "It rather does." "Any regrets?" She thought about it. About her stepmother waiting like a spider in her web. About Ambrose Craven circling like a shark. About all the forces arrayed against them. All the reasons this should not work. "None," she said. His smile was like sunrise. "Good. Neither do I." They reached Ironmore 3 days after leaving Westvale. The estate rose from the moorland like a fortress, all dark stone and towering spires, and windows that glittered like watchful eyes in the fading light. It was beautiful in a severe, uncompromising way, the kind of beauty that demanded respect rather than affection. "Welcome to my home," Valdric said quietly. "Such as it is." Seren stared up at the massive structure, feeling suddenly very small. This was a duke's residence. This was where earls and barons and lords came to pay their respects. And she was a woman in a borrowed dress, with dirt under her fingernails, and a dead girl's name. "It is very large," she managed. "Too large for one person. It echoes." He guided the horse toward the main entrance, where servants were already emerging to greet them. "I have always hated the echoes." The staff received them with barely concealed shock. Their master had been missing for nearly a week, presumed dead by some, hoped dead by others, and now here he was, battered and pale but alive, with a strange woman at his side. "Your Grace, the butler," a silver-haired man with a face like carved granite, managed to say. "We were not expecting. I imagine not. Have rooms prepared for Miss Thorne. She is a distant relation who will be staying with us indefinitely." Valdric's voice brooked no argument. "And send for Dr. Ashworth. I have wounds that need proper attention." "Of course, Your Grace." The next hours blurred together. Servants whisked Seren away to a guest chamber larger than the entire hunting lodge, with a copper tub already being filled with steaming water. She bathed for the first time in days, scrubbing away the grime and exhaustion, watching the water turn gray, and then brown, and then clear. Clean clothes had been laid out for her, a simple dress in dark blue wool, finer than anything she had worn in 3 years. She put it on with shaking hands, barely recognizing the woman who looked back at her from the mirror. A knock at the door. "Miss Thorne?" A maid, young and nervous. "His Grace requests your presence in the library, if you are ready." She was not ready. She would never be ready. But she went anyway. The library was enormous, lined floor to ceiling with books, dominated by a fire that roared in a hearth large enough to stand in. Valdric sat in a leather chair before the flames, freshly bandaged, wearing clean clothes that made him look almost civilized. Almost. There was still something wild in his eyes, something that did not quite fit the polished surroundings. "Dr. Ashworth says I will live," he said as she entered, though he expressed considerable displeasure at the quality of my previous care. "I told you I did not know what I was doing. And yet, you kept me alive." The good doctor was grudgingly impressed. He gestured to the chair beside his. "Sit. We need to talk about what happens next." She sat, tucking her feet beneath her, feeling the warmth of the fire seep into her bones. "What has happened next? Tomorrow I send word to London, to my solicitors, my allies, the few men in government I trust. I begin the process of exposing Ambrose for what he is and protecting myself from further attacks." He paused, firelight dancing across his features. "And I begin the process of resurrecting you." "Resurrecting me?" "Your stepmother had you declared dead. That declaration can be challenged. If we can prove that you are alive, that you have been held against your will, that your inheritance was stolen through fraud." His jaw worked. She will face consequences, legal consequences, the kind that cannot be bribed or talked away. You make it sound simple. It will not be simple. It will be complicated and expensive and ugly. His eyes met hers. But it can be done, if you are willing. Willing to what? To fight. To stand before society and declare yourself alive. To face your stepmother and your stepsister and your father and everyone who allowed this to happen. He reached for her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. To let me stand beside you while you do it. She thought of Ashford Hall, of the cold kitchen where she had eaten scraps, of the servants who had looked through her like she was not there, of Fidelia's ring cutting her cheek, of her father's averted eyes, of her stepmother's smile like broken glass. 3 years of being buried alive. Yes, she said. I am willing. Good. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and something shifted between them. The air grew heavier, charged with unspoken possibilities. Because I meant what I said in Westvale. Every word of it. So did I. He leaned closer, and she met him halfway. This kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper, filled with the knowledge of what they were choosing. When it ended, she stayed in his arms, her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This is still madness, she murmured. Complete madness, he agreed. I would not have it any other way. They stayed like that until the fire burned low, wrapped in each other, suspended in a moment that felt like it could last forever. It could not, of course. Nothing could. But for one night, they let themselves pretend. Reality arrived with the morning post. Seren was at breakfast when Valdric entered, his face pale, a letter clutched in his hand. She knew immediately that something was wrong. What is it? She asked. He did not answer, simply handed her the letter. She read it twice, her blood growing colder with each word. It was from her stepmother. Cordelia Ashford to His Grace, the Duke of Ironmore. I write to warn you that a dangerous impostor has recently been seen in the company of your grace. This woman claims to be Seren Ashford, the daughter of my husband Roland, who tragically died 3 years ago. In truth, she is Marin Webb, a former servant who was dismissed from our household for theft, and who has clearly found a new way to exploit the kindness of her betters. I urge your grace to exercise caution. This woman is unstable, manipulative, and desperate. She has constructed an elaborate fantasy about her origins, and will say anything to maintain it. If she has not already attempted to seduce your grace into some inappropriate arrangement, she surely will soon. I remain your faithful servant, Cordelia Ashford. Seren's hands were shaking. She is lying, all of it, every word. I know. I was never a servant named Marin Webb. I was never dismissed for theft. She is trying to discredit me before I can speak, I know. Valdric took the letter back, his expression grim. But she has already sent copies to half the families in the county. By this afternoon, everyone will believe that my houseguest is either a fraud or a madwoman. Then we deny it. We tell the truth. It is not that simple. He moved to the window, staring out at the gray morning. Your word against hers. A woman who has been legally dead for 3 years against a respectable widow with connections throughout society. Who do you think they will believe? You believe me. I do. But I am already suspected of being involved in scandals far worse than harboring an impostor. My support may hurt you more than it helps. The words hit like a slap. She stood, moving toward him, needing to see his face. What are you saying? I am saying that I may have made a mistake. He still would not look at her. Bringing you here, announcing you to my staff, making my feelings. For you obvious to anyone with eyes, your feelings. If Ambrose learns that I care for you, he will use it. He will use you. Finally, he turned, and she saw something terrible in his expression. Something that looked like defeat. I have made you a target. simply by keeping you close. I was already a target. Not like this. Not to a man like Ambrose, his hands curled into fists. I should have sent you somewhere safe, somewhere far from here, where neither he nor your stepmother could reach you. You cannot be serious. I am trying to protect you. By sending me away? Her voice rose, anger and fear, and something that felt dangerously like heartbreak mixing together. By treating me like a burden to be managed rather than a person to be trusted? That is not what That is exactly what you are doing. She stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. You are doing what my father did, what everyone in my life has done. You are deciding what is best for me without asking what I want. What you want could get you killed. Then let me choose to take that risk. Her voice cracked. Let me choose, Valdrick. For once in my life, let someone trust me to make my own decisions. Silence stretched between them, thick and painful. I cannot watch you die, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I cannot lose someone else I care about because I was not careful enough. You will not lose me. You cannot promise that. Neither can you promise to keep me safe by pushing me away. She reached for his hands, unfolding his fists, pressing her palms against his. I would rather face Ambrose and my stepmother, and the entire world with you beside me, than be safe and alone somewhere else. Seren, I am not finished. She tightened her grip. Last night, you asked me to fight. You asked me to stand before society and declare myself alive. Did you mean it? Or were those just pretty words? I meant it. Then trust me to fight. Trust me to be strong enough. Trust me to choose you, even knowing the dangers. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his face changed. The defeat faded, replaced by something fiercer. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met, he said. I learned from the best. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his face buried in her hair. I am sorry. I panicked. The thought of Ambrose getting his hands on you, of your stepmother twisting everything to destroy you. I know. I will not send you away. I will not make decisions for you. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. But you need to understand what we are facing. Your stepmother has drawn first blood. She has painted you as a liar and a thief before you could say a single word in your own defense. Then we need to strike back, hard, before she can do more damage. Agreed. His eyes hardened with resolve. I will send for my solicitors today. We will gather evidence of who you really are. Birth records. Witnesses who knew you as a child. Anything that proves beyond doubt that you are Seren Ashford. And my father? He could confirm everything. Would he? She thought of Roland Ashford, the man who had once bounced her on his knee and called her his little star. The man who had watched his second wife erase his daughter from existence and done nothing. I do not know, she admitted. He has not been himself since my mother died. Cordelia controls him completely. Then we find another way. Valdrick kissed her forehead, gentle but firm. We find witnesses, documents, proof that even your stepmother cannot deny. And when we have it, we expose her for what she is. And Ambrose? One enemy at a time. His smile was grim. Though I suspect they may prove to be connected. Your stepmother's letter arrived very quickly. Almost as if she already knew where you were. The implication chilled her. You think she is working with your cousin? I think Ambrose makes alliances wherever he finds advantage, and a respectable widow with connections and resources would be exactly the kind of ally he would seek. Then we fight them both, side by side. She kissed him, hard and fierce, pouring all her fear and determination into the contact. When they broke apart, she felt something settle in her chest, a decision made, a path chosen. Whatever came next, she would face it standing rather than running. and God help anyone who tried to bury her again. The evidence arrived piece by piece over the following weeks. Birth records from the parish church where Seren had been baptized. Letters written by her mother, saved by a former governess who had been dismissed shortly after Cordelia's arrival. Testimony from servants who remembered the real Seren Ashford, who had watched her transformation from cherished daughter to household ghost. And most damning of all, a copy of her father's will. The original will, written before Cordelia had gained control of the household, which left the entire Ashford estate to Seren upon Roland's death. "This is it," Valdric said, spreading the documents across his desk. "This is why she buried you. As long as you were alive, you stood to inherit everything. By declaring you dead, she cleared the path for herself and her daughter. Can we prove she falsified my death? The physician who signed your death certificate has since fled the country. That alone is suspicious." Valdric tapped one of the papers. "And I have witnesses who saw you alive in the Ashford household long after your supposed burial. Servants she dismissed. Tenants she evicted. People with no reason to lie. It might be enough." "It will be enough." He looked up at her, eyes blazing. "We take this to the magistrate. We demand an investigation. And when the truth comes out, your stepmother will face charges of fraud, false imprisonment, and theft of inheritance." "And my father?" Valdric hesitated. "That will depend on how much he knew. If he was complicit, he will face consequences. If he was manipulated, he was manipulated." Serene's voice was quiet but firm. "I know it does not excuse what he allowed, but my father is weak, not evil. Cordelia saw that weakness and exploited it. Then we will let the courts decide his fate. But Cordelia and Fidelia, his jaw worked. They will answer for what they did to you." Before she could respond, the butler appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace, there are visitors at the gate. Lord Craven, accompanied by Mrs. Ashford and Miss Ashford." Serene's blood went cold. Valdric rose slowly, his expression hardening into something dangerous. Did they state their business? Lord Craven claims they have come to discuss a family matter. He requests an audience. I am certain he does. Valdric glanced at Serene. "You do not have to face them. I can send them away." "No." She stood, straightening her spine. "I have spent 3 years hiding, running, being afraid." She met his eyes. Not anymore. Something flickered in his gaze. Pride, perhaps, or admiration. "Side by side, then," he said. "Always." They met their enemies in the Great Hall, a vast chamber designed to intimidate. Ambrose Craven entered first, elegant and smiling, every inch the charming aristocrat. Behind him came Cordelia Ashford, dressed in expensive black like a widow of means, her face arranged in an expression of gentle concern. And behind her, Fidelia, beautiful and brittle, wearing a sapphire ring that Seren recognized. It had belonged to her mother. "Cousin." Ambrose spread his hands in greeting. "You look well, remarkably well, considering recent events." "What do you want, Ambrose?" "Merely to discuss a matter of mutual concern." Ambrose's gaze slid to Serene, and his smile widened. "Specifically the impostor you are harboring under your roof. There is no impostor here." "No?" Cordelia stepped forward, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Your Grace, I understand you may have been deceived. This woman is very convincing. But I assure you, she is not who she claims to be. And I assure you, Mrs. Ashford, that I know exactly who she is." Valdric's voice was ice. "I know that she is Serene Ashford, your stepdaughter, whom you declared dead so you could steal her inheritance." Cordelia's expression flickered, but she recovered quickly. "These are very serious accusations, Your Grace. They are facts, documented, witnessed, soon to be presented to the magistrate." "Lies," Fidelia spat, unable to contain herself. She has always been a liar, a manipulator. She has clearly seduced you into believing her fantasies. Careful, Miss Ashford. Valdrick's tone dropped to something truly dangerous. You are speaking about a woman under my protection. Choose your words wisely. Ambrose laughed, light and pleasant, as if they were discussing the weather. Cousin, there is no need for threats. We have simply come to offer a solution that benefits everyone. What solution? The woman returns with Mrs. Ashford to receive proper care for her mental affliction. You avoid the scandal of harboring a disturbed impostor. And we all pretend this unfortunate misunderstanding never happened. No. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Not from Valdrick, from Seren. She stepped forward, placing herself between Valdrick and her tormentors. Her heart was pounding, her hands trembling, but her voice was steady. No, I will not go with you. I will not be buried again. And I will not allow you to continue profiting from the lie you built on my grave. Cordelia's mask slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. You ungrateful creature. We took you in when you had nothing. Fed you, clothed you, and gave you a roof over your head. You stole everything I had. My name, my inheritance, my life. Serene's voice rose. You made me a servant in my own home. You let your daughter beat me. You erased me from existence because I was inconvenient. You were always weak, Fidelia hissed, just like your mother. Pathetic, mewling, desperate for scraps of affection. You deserved what you got. Enough. Valdrick's voice cracked like thunder. You have made your position clear, and I have made mine. Serene Ashford stays under my protection. Any attempt to harm her or discredit her further will be met with the full force of my resources and influence. Ambrose's smile faded. You are making a mistake, cousin. The only mistake I made was not seeing you clearly years ago. Valdrick stepped forward, and even injured, even weakened, he radiated menace. I know it was you who sent those men to kill me on the moors. I know you have been plotting to take my title for years. And I know you have allied yourself with these vipers in some scheme to destroy us both. Careful, cousin. Accusations without proof can be dangerous. I have proof. More than enough to bury you. Valdrick smiled, thin and cold. Did you really think I would not investigate? That I would not trace your mercenaries, follow your money, and document your meetings with Mrs. Ashford? For the first time, something like fear flickered in Ambrose's eyes. You have 1 week, Valdrick continued. 1 week to put your affairs in order before I present my evidence to the authorities. I suggest you use that time wisely. Cordelia's face had gone white. You cannot do this. I can. I will. And there is nothing you can do to stop me. Valdrick turned to the butler. Show our guests out. They are no longer welcome at Ironmore. The 3 of them were escorted from the hall in stunned silence. Seren watched them go, watched her tormentors finally face consequences for their cruelty, and felt something crack open in her chest. It was not over. Not yet. But for the first time, she was fighting back, and she was winning. The week that followed was chaos. Ambrose fled the country 3 days after their confrontation, taking what portable wealth he could carry and leaving behind a trail of debts and furious creditors. Without his protection, Cordelia and Fidelia found themselves suddenly vulnerable. Former allies distanced themselves, invitations dried up, whispers followed them wherever they went. And in the magistrate's office, the evidence piled higher and higher. It is done, Valdrick said, entering the library where Seren waited. The magistrate has issued a warrant for Cordelia's arrest. Charges of fraud, false imprisonment, and theft of inheritance. Fidelia is named as an accomplice. Seren closed her eyes, breathing deeply. And my father? He has agreed to testify against his wife in exchange for leniency. His solicitor claims he was manipulated, coerced, too grief-stricken after your mother's death, to resist Cordelia's influence. Is that enough to save him? Perhaps. The magistrate seemed inclined toward mercy, given his cooperation. Valdric sat beside her, taking her hand. But the estate will need to be sorted, your inheritance restored. It will take months, perhaps years. I do not care about the inheritance. You should. It is yours by right. What I care about is that they can never hurt anyone again. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. That is what matters, not the money or the property or any of it. He studied her for a long moment. Then, quietly, there is something else. What? He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. Velvet, worn at the edges, clearly old. This belonged to my grandmother, he said. She gave it to my mother, who gave it to Thea, who left it to me when she died. He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple gold band, set with a single sapphire that caught the light like a piece of the sky. I have been carrying it for 2 years, waiting for the right moment, the right person. Serene's breath caught. I know this is fast, he continued. I know we have only known each other for weeks. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is madness. Valdric, let me finish. Please. He took her hand, his grip warm and steady. When I found myself bleeding on the moors, when I thought I was going to die alone in the cold and the dark, I had one regret. Not the war, not Velmira, not any of it. My one regret was that I had never truly lived. I had spent so many years being the butcher, being the duke, being what everyone else needed me to be, that I had forgotten to be myself. You are yourself with me. I know. That is why I cannot imagine my life without you in it. He slid off the chair, kneeling before her, the ring held between them. Serene Ashford, you saved my life. You made me want to live it. And I am asking, hoping, praying that you will let me spend the rest of my days trying to deserve you. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. You already deserve me. You deserved me the moment you looked at me and saw a person instead of a ghost. Is that a yes? She laughed, a sound that was half sob. Yes. Of course yes. 1,000 times. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he rose and kissed her, deep and tender, and full of promise. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you too. She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. But you need to understand something. I am not doing this for the title or the protection or any of that. I know. I am doing this because you are the first person in 3 years who made me believe I was worth fighting for. Her voice shook. You looked at a woman covered in blood and mud and despair, and you saw someone worth saving. That is why I am saying yes. Then we are even. Because you looked at a monster from the stories and saw someone worth loving. He pressed his forehead to hers. We are quite the pair. The butcher and the buried bride. That would make a terrible novel. Perhaps. But it makes a wonderful life. He kissed her again, and she let herself fall into it. Let herself believe that this impossible thing was real. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. 6 months later, the wedding was held in the chapel at Ironmore. The legal matters had finally been resolved. Cordelia Ashford had been convicted of fraud, false imprisonment, and theft of inheritance. She would spend the next 15 years in prison, her reputation destroyed beyond repair. Fidelia, convicted as an accomplice, had been sentenced to 7 years, her dreams of a society marriage crumbling to dust. The sapphire ring that had once belonged to Serene's mother had been returned to its rightful owner. And Roland Ashford, broken and weeping, had been granted mercy by the courts in exchange for his testimony. He was a shell of the man he had once been, but he was trying. Slowly, painfully, he was trying to become the father Serene remembered. The ceremony was small, with only a handful of witnesses present. Seren wore her mother's dress, salvaged from Ashford Hall by servants loyal to the woman they remembered. It had been stored in an attic trunk for 3 years, waiting for a day that everyone assumed would never come. The silk was ivory, the lace delicate, and the fit perfect. Valdric wore his military uniform, the one he had sworn never to touch again. But this was a new beginning, he told her, and new beginnings sometimes required making peace with the old. The vicar pronounced them husband and wife, just as the bells began to ring. "How does it feel?" Valdric asked as they walked out of the chapel, hand in hand. "Being a duchess? Strange. Terrifying." She smiled up at him. "Wonderful. Good. Because there is someone waiting for you." She followed his gaze to the steps below, where a carriage had stopped. A man emerged, older, grayer, more stooped than she remembered. Her father. Roland Ashford climbed the steps slowly, his eyes fixed on her face. He had aged decades in the months since the trial, the weight of guilt and shame carving deep lines around his mouth. "Seren," he said, his voice cracking. "My little star." She did not know what to feel. Anger, yes. Grief for the years they had lost. But beneath it all, something else, something that might, with time, become forgiveness. "Papa." He fell to his knees before her, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I let her. I should have. I failed you in every way a father can fail." "Yes." She did not soften the word. "You did. I know. I know. And I cannot expect you to forgive me. But I needed you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I could not say it. Even when I let her silence you. I never stopped." She looked down at this broken man, this shadow of the father, who had once made her feel like the most precious thing in the world, and felt something shift in her chest. "I cannot forgive you yet," she said quietly. "Not fully. Not for a long time. I understand, but I can try." She reached down, touching his shoulder. "If you can try to be the father I remember." He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "I will. I swear it." Valdric helped him to his feet, guiding him into the chapel where a seat had been saved, and Seren watched her father go, knowing that this too was part of healing, part of coming back to life. The reception was held in the great hall of Ironmore, transformed with flowers and candles and music that filled every corner. Guests danced and laughed and toasted the unlikely union of the butcher and the buried bride. But the moment Seren would remember forever came later, when the guests had gone and the candles had burned low. She stood at the window of the ducal chambers, looking out at the moors that had nearly killed them both. Valdric came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "None." She leaned back against him. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner. You found me when you were meant to." She turned in his arms, facing him. "Any earlier, and neither of us would have been ready." "You believe that?" "I do. I believe that every terrible thing that happened, the moors, the storm, the wounds, all of it was leading us here. To this moment." He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "The buried bride and the butcher of Velmyra, making each other human again. I was always human. So was I. I had just forgotten." He pulled back, looking into her eyes. "You reminded me." Outside, the moon rose over the moors, painting the landscape silver. And in the great house that had echoed with loneliness for so long, two people who had both been buried in their own ways found each other, held each other, chose each other. Not because a storm left them no choice, but because they made the choice themselves. And somewhere, in a cold prison cell, Cordelia Ashford finally understood what she had lost. The stepdaughter she had buried was not merely alive. She was a duchess. She was loved. She was free. Fidelia, too, had learned. On the day of the wedding, word had reached her cell that the ghost she had struck, the servant she had tormented, the nothing she had tried to erase, was now one of the most powerful women in England. She had wept, they said. Wept and raged, and finally fallen silent, the weight of her choices crushing her at last. The cruel family had bowed, not with grace, not with dignity, but with the broken submission of those who had gambled everything on cruelty and lost. But Serene Ashford Thorne, Duchess of Ironmore, no longer needed anyone to bow. She had something better than power. She had a home. She had a family. She had a man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he found. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the jewels and titles and inheritance in the world. Worth fighting for, worth living for, worth choosing, again and again, for the rest of their lives. Thank you for staying with Serene and Valdric until the very end. Their story began with a woman buried alive by her own family, and a man who had forgotten how to live. But in the darkness of the moors, they found each other, and they chose love over duty, over fear, over everything that tried to keep them apart. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting, more impossible loves, more buried brides and butchers finding their way back to life, more reminders that sometimes the darkest storms lead us exactly where we need to be. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist.